It's the Kosher Organic Ranchero with your host, Yomenu. Now today, we are going to make a remarkable dish. It's going to be a Boston cream pie with our scientific baking enthusiast, Tziporah. We're going to be using the Strauss Family Creamery whipped cream and European-style butter. So we're going to show you how to make something remarkable with them. So, let's get cracking! Welcome back to the Kosher Organic Ranchero, and now may I introduce Tziporah, our scientific baking enthusiast. Now, Tziporah is going to introduce to us the way in which we can learn about the science behind and underlying the Boston cream pie. Take it away, Tziporah.
Thank you.
So tell me, what are we going to be doing today?
Today, I'm going to make a Boston cream pie. Now, that's not actually a pie. It is a sponge cake, a double layer sponge cake with custard that goes in the middle and then chocolate that is glazed over the top. Well, first we're going to be making the sponge cake of the Boston cream pie. We have two cake pans here because we're making 2 layers, and it's a spring-form baking pan of 9-inch diameter, and we have parchment lining the bottom. You can put butter on the bottom and also along the sides of the baking pan, and then you dust it with flour, and the flour sticks to the butter, and that creates a layer separating the cake batter from the baking pan, and then the cake will come off cleanly and smoothly and without sticking or breaking.
This butter over here, is at room temperature?
Yes, this butter we're going to use to cream with the sugar, so we have it at room temperature. It's been sitting out for a little bit, and it will cream together with the sugar quite nicely.
Marvelous.
The purpose of the ingredient of the sugar is mostly for taste. The butter, however, is used to create a hydrophobic layer around the starch granules inside the flour. That way, the water and the liquid can't get inside the starch granules of the flour and create gluten. We want to minimize the amount of gluten created in the batter, because the more gluten strands that are created between starch granules, the stretchier and tougher the batter will be. And we want to keep it as light and fluffy as possible. Okay, so now we're going to be taking the room temperature butter and we're going to be dropping it into the mixture. For this, we're using about 200 grams of unsalted butter, and that's about 14 tablespoons. We're going to be using these 2 extra tablespoons in the custard, so we can save that for later.
How do you decide whether to use weight or volume when you measure?
The reason we are using grams for these measurements is because a cup of flour is not the equivalent of a cup of sugar, because their densities are different. So if you use 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of sugar, that's standardized, and that creates a perfect ratio between the ingredients. So we need 200 grams of sugar for this. That's about a cup of sugar. And
200 grams exactly. What an excellent scientific baking enthusiast.
Thank you. Now we've poured in the 200 grams of sugar with the butter, and we're going to be creaming them together until it's nice and smooth. Always remember to use a spatula to scrape down the sides of the mixture so that you can get everything together and it's a smooth, even consistency. So the next thing we're going to do is add the eggs to the sugar and butter mixture.
For this remarkable Boston cream pie, we're using the green Arucana eggs that come from the Rancho. They have a remarkable yellow yolk that you'll see in a moment.
Before we add the eggs to the butter and sugar mixture, we want to put them in a bowl of warm water. That will bring them to room temperature. The reason we do this is because the protein in the egg whites becomes warmer and it's easier for it to capture air. And the whole thing about cake is, remember, capturing air. That will make a better cake. And before we do that, we are going to kosher them and make sure that there are no blood spots on the yolk. And we check that there are no blood spots. And we also admire how deep yellow those yolks are. And I like to, before I add the egg, I just poke a hole in the yolk so that it's able to break and mix into the butter a little easier. I drop it and put it on a medium setting. So the next step is to measure out the flour, and this is going to be 200 grams of flour as well. See, the thing about measuring in grams, which makes it easier, is it's 200 grams of flour, 200 grams of sugar, and 200 grams of butter. So it's a pretty easy recipe to remember as long as you're going with grams. And next, we're going to want to sift together flour, baking powder, and salt. 200 grams of flour is also about equivalent to 1.5 cups of flour, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So now this is the most important ingredient, and what happens is when the baking powder comes in contact with liquid, the salts inside the baking powder turn into acid, and the acid reacts with the potassium bicarbonate. That produces carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide lifts the cake and fills it with bubbles that cause the cake to rise. Our next step is to add the flour mixture to the butter mixture. We want to do that gradually and at a slow speed so that it doesn't create any clumps inside the mixture. So now we are adding about 2 tablespoons of the Strauss Family Creamery milk.